Hi software folks, let's try to do a Leetcode problem 443 today, which is a string compression. This problem is also known as run length encoding. Actually, if you do some research online, you would see that run length encoding is a lossless data compression technique which basically tries to encode a string using this technique. So we will take a look at this. Let's read it quickly to see what it is trying to say. So given an array of characters, compress it in place. So we cannot do any extra memory allocation or anything like that. The length after compression must always be smaller than or equal to the original array. So that's another thing that we have to keep track in mind. So we will see where that might be useful in consideration. So now let's go back to, so now let's see what he's saying here. He's saying every element of the array should be a character, not integer. Okay. So after you're done modifying the input array in place, return the new length of the array. Okay, good. That's very good. Now, could you solve it using only one extra space, which means space complexity should be constant, no extra space is allowed, and the space should not change with the input. Basically, the constant space means that. So now coming to here, example he is giving you is this is string A, B, B, C repeated 3 times, and he's saying it should be converted to A2, B2, C3. And since the length of this string is 6, we are returning 6 here. Now look at this case, which is just A. He's saying return 1, and the first one character input array should be A, because what here I guess what he's saying is do not put the count of the repetitions if it only occurs once, because there are no repetitions, and it would also break the second requirement that if you were to say here A1, you would actually break the second requirement that the length after compression must always be smaller than or equal to the original array. All right, so that's good. He's saying nothing is replaced in this case. So now this case is A and then B repeated. Let's see, I think that is 12 times. So that's why it's saying return 4, because it's the new length of the array, and this is how we should be writing. And it's saying B1, 2 is actually replaced by B1 and 2 rather than B and then 12, because he's saying each digit has its own entry in the array. And these are some other requirement, which is the length of the character array will be less than 1000, and all characters have an ASCII. So let's try to give it a shot and see if we can do it. So what we would do is we would start with two variables. One is I, which we will use to walk the array, input array, and other would be index, which we would use to write into the original array. So this index, basically this index variable will keep track where in the array we are basically writing, where the next write in the array is going to be. So now let's start. So we will say while I is less than len cars. So what we should do is we just have another variable j. So let's say you have something like this here, and if you have something like this, let's take an example here. So we'll start with I pointing to this first character. This is I0, and then j, we can start another incrementing variable which is j, and by setting j to I in the beginning and keeping I fixed, we just keep incrementing j as long as I and j are the same character, as long as the same character is repeated. So that should be our approach. So let's try to do that. So we say j equal to I. Now what we do is we say while j less than len cars, because we don't want to run at the end of the array outside its limits, and we say cars j equal to cars I. Basically the same character is repeated. We continue to say j, we keep incrementing j. So that gives us, so that is where we would continue with the same character. At the end of it, what we do is we say cats. Now is our time to modify the input array in place. So we say cats index, which is where we start writing, is equal to chars I, which is the first character that we started, and then we have to increment the index so that we don't mess up where we write next time. And at that point what we do is we see how many times we have the last character repeated. You say count equal to j minus I. Now we have to write the count as digits into the input array. And how do we do that? We say we have to write them as characters, not as digits, not as numbers. So while we will say for C in str count, that is basically str function will convert the count into the string, and you say for each character in that, for example, if count is 12, then it will be like for C in str would give us 1, and then it will give us 2. So let's see. So for C in str count, we would be writing chars index, which is our variable to keep track where the next write happens, and we will say chars index equal to C. Index will be incremented, and that is there. So we would, at this point we have done something like A2 and B2 and things like that. So now once we have done with the iteration of all the repetitions of a character, we are at a new character because this condition would have become false. So now we start by resetting I to j, and then the whole loop is repeated. At the end of that, when we are done with this, we would do now. Okay, so one thing we have forgotten to take into account is that if count is greater than 1, then only we have this, because otherwise we would be also be writing something like just this case A, we might end up writing A1, but we don't want that. So you say count greater than 1. That was a good catch here, by the way. So let's fix that. Alright, so I equal to j. So this is the end of the while loop. When the while loop is done, index is the new length of the array, because that is where we did the last write. So we will modify the input array in place. We say chars equal to chars index, which is Python's way of slicing. So this goes from 0 to index minus 1, and then we say return index. So that's the index is the new length of that. So let's try to run this. It's saying char is not defined, and that is at line 7. So okay, let's fix that. Alright, so that one has passed. It's saying output and expected C3. Let's try to do a submit. I wonder you didn't say expected here, but in any case, let's do a submit. At least you didn't say fail. So, well, that has passed, and it is all looking good. All the test cases passed, and it said it faster than 83% of Python 3 online submissions. So that's where that problem is. It's pretty interesting, I would say. Usually it is a very popular problem for interview questions, because it's kind of a low-hanging fruit, and it gives us some practice on walking the sequences, keeping track of multiple indexes into the sequences, and counting the occurrences of certain characters. Or we might have seen the same problems you might have seen in when you have to reverse words or things like that. Like if you had a sentence and you have to keep track where the sentence ends, we use this two indices approach there too, and seeing where the alphanumeric characters end. So it's kind of something similar. Well, I had fun solving this problem. I hope you will enjoy doing these problems on your own also. And I would next time we might take these other challenges here, encode and decode strings. And until next time, I will say goodbye to you folks and happy coding. Bye bye.